What do recent changes in the beef sector mean for the future of Irish farming, and how can farmers maximise current beef prices while making the most of our world-class grass-based systems? Join us at the Teagasc Beef Open Day, sponsored by FBD Insurance, at Teagasc Grange, Wednesday, July 1st from 9 a.m. See live animal, grassland and facilities demonstrations and hear the latest insights shaping the future of beef farming. Beef 2026, a key event for everyone in the beef sector. Wednesday, July 1st at Teagasc Grange, County Meath. Don't miss it.
You're looking at probably a 2-year cycle, and sometimes that's the stumbling block that people forget, that the cash flow for 2 years can be drained out of the system very quickly while you're waiting for this return on investment. Now, some breeds, I suppose, such as maybe the early maturing breeds or maybe some of the continentals, maybe a bit more saleable, but especially if you're going on that Frisian route or a very dairy bred route, buying these cheaper calves, you really are looking at taking them to the finish to make a return, and they can leave a good return as well.
Hello and welcome to the Beef Edge, the Teagasc Beef podcast, for all your latest news, information and advice for Irish beef farmers. I'm Catherine Egan, and on this week's episode I'm joined by Teagasc researcher Jamie O'Driscoll and DB500 manager Alan Dillon to get an update on the dairy beef research taking place in Teagasc Grange and how this is being implemented on the DairyBeef 500 farms, and the upcoming National Beef Open Day Beef 2026 taking place on the 1st of July in Teagasc Grange. Jamie, we've seen the number of dairy beef animals increase in Ireland in recent years. What impact is that having?
Yeah, so Catherine, if you look now at the makeup of the national beef kill, it's now 62% dairy origin animals. And with that, comes challenges. The dams that these animals have been bred for dairy production, and with that, it's antagonistic with beef production traits. So it brings about challenges in terms of animal performance. So I guess that's a main focus of the open day for us this year, is how we can alleviate this issue maybe in terms of animal genetics.
Farmers are hearing a lot about the commercial beef value, or CBV. What's the purpose of the commercial beef value and what impact is that having?
Yeah, so Catherine, the commercial beef value itself is, I guess, a selection breeding value for purchasing beef animals for the farmer. It gives the animal an overall economic value of their potential profitability in comparison to other animals. And, the CBV it's being shown at research level to be effective in increasing profit. So this also translates at a national level also. If you look at an analysis of 50,000 cattle across the country by the ICBF, we see that animals in the top third of the CBV versus the bottom third of the CBV had a difference of €170 in value. So a 3-to-1 return on investment, because these calves cost €55 more at time of purchase. But it is coming through at farm level.
That's great, Jimmy. I suppose, Alan, you're seeing it as part of the DairyBeef 500 programme. What impact that's having at farm level also. What benefits do farmers gain from purchasing these higher CBV calves?
Yeah, Catherine, I suppose the first thing is, Jamie touched on it there, they're not costing a whole pile more than they've been bought. In a lot of cases, there's probably, in buying off farm in particular, there's probably no differential being given between buying high and low CBV calves, that they're being purchased at kind of a flat average price. And the smart farmers, I suppose, are identifying these calves now and the herds they're being sourced from, or maybe buying them in the March where they're not being probably given their proper value either, and they're actually buying these calves in and getting a much greater level of performance in terms of carcass gain, age of slaughter, and maybe a slight bit in terms of feed efficiency and in terms of the grading. But that's the big one there, that you're seeing a huge increase in output. You're seeing carcasses coming in at maybe up to 340 kilos or 345 kilos on Angus and Herefords, for example, versus, on the high CBV ones, versus, you're talking the low ones, you could be talking 290 to 300 kilos maybe for some of the lower ones. So you have a huge differential there in terms of what you're getting at the end of the day, and not really paying a whole pile extra day one. Now, maybe that'll change in time when people become a bit more aware of CBV and its benefits, but at the minute, there's a big benefit in terms of sourcing those calves and purchasing them in the higher CBV range.
Alan, from working with the DairyBeef 500 Programme farms, what factors should be considered when choosing a dairy beef production system?
I think that the biggest stumbling block we often see is the housing. Having the correct housing in place for when you start to purchase these calves, especially if it's a change of system that's coming onto the farm. So if you were in, we'll say, dry stock production, such as buying stores and finishing them or whatever it is, or you were in suckler cows, selling weanlings or whatever it is, you may not exactly have a shed that may be suitable to rear calves. And we do see a lot of farmers that just jump into that system, end up with a lot of trouble on the health side of things in the rearing phase with calves. And that can be quite off-putting, especially in the if you're new to the game. So ensuring that your housing, I suppose, has enough space, it's got plenty of ventilation, adequate drainage, good feeding facilities to make it as simple as possible are very important. I think so. That calf house is number one. Um, and then I suppose you should remember that this is a 2-year cycle, really. They're not really a type of animal by and large you're looking at selling in the mart. They're not as fancy as, let's say, your suckler weanlings or anything like that have maybe an export value a lot of the time. So you're looking at probably a 2-year cycle. And sometimes that's the stumbling block that people forget, that the cash flow for 2 years can be drained out of the system very quickly while you're waiting for this return on investment. Now, some breeds, I suppose, such as maybe the early maturing breeds or maybe some of the continentals, maybe a bit more saleable, but especially if you're going on that Frisian route or, a real dairy bred route, buying these cheaper calves, you really are looking at taking them to the finish to make a return. And they can leave a good return as well. And then I suppose, look, your grassland management, we'll be probably touching on it again, but your grassland management, is key, along with your silage quality, and making sure that these herd health issues don't hit in, because if they hit in, really you could be looking at an animal that's performing poorly or extremely stunted on the farm for up to 2 years afterwards, which will be a bit soul destroying. And the other thing is, people have to remember, look, it's a lot of part-time farmers get involved in this. There's quite a high labour requirement for this in the springtime. It's not too bad the rest of the year, but those first 6-7 weeks after calves arrive on the farm can be fairly intensive. Monitoring health, bedding, feeding, etc. So it's just that you're set up for that and you're aware that what's involved in this without going in blindly.
Jamie, following on from what Alan has said there, housing and handling facilities is something that's very important in Teagasc Grange in the DairyBeef system.
Yeah, so Catherine, the last few years we've been using our new calf housing facility here in Teagasc Grange, and look, it's been a great benefit to the research studies. We see, as Alan spoke about there, the shed that has proper ventilation within it, very good drainage, the correct fall in the ground as well to ensure drainage goes down to the actual tanks. It's something that we've seen a big improvement in overall calf welfare and calf health. And this year, in combination with the vaccination protocol on farm, we've probably had our best year ever in terms of calf rearing. And I think it's down to the fact that we have the new shed now with the microenvironments at the back as well, that it all makes a big difference.
And Alan touched there on the importance of good grazing management and how that has such an influence on profitability. How is grazing going at the moment on the DairyBeef unit?
I think every farmer's in the same boat this week. Grass kind of went a little bit mad the end of last week with the high temperatures. But look, we're well into the 4th round now of grazing. We're moving quite quickly. We're taking out paddocks surplus as they come. So we're cutting out any paddocks that go over 2,000 kilos of dry matter. We're grazing it up to that point, but once we go beyond the 2,000 kilos, we are taking out them paddocks. Look, it probably has led to us cutting more of the platform than we would have done in previous years. We normally would only cut out maybe 55 to 60% for first cut silage. This year, the way it's looking, it'll be closer to 70% of the platform. But look, it's leading to us having very good quality aftermaths coming back, good quality aftergrass coming for calves a turnout now. So other than that, though, it's been a good year once we got out.
And I suppose, Alan, from your experience with the DB500 farms, what were the big changes that those farms made to improve efficiency and utilisation of grass on the farm?
There's a lot of investment, Catherine, I suppose, in infrastructure. Now, it wasn't cheap. Look, that involved putting down bits of roadways and paddocking off fields and water trucks and underground water pipes going in. But look, I suppose all these, the way you justify these is it's a once-off. You do it right, chances are you probably won't need to do a lot of it again for the rest of your life, And I suppose there was a good bit of, investment in soil fertility too. Lime is our big focus, really. A lot of these farms are very deficient in lime. And there was quite an amount of money spent, a surprising amount spent there in the first 3 or 4 years after we got going with these farms to try and improve the lime status. Prior to entering, into a more heavy reseeding type program. And that's something I suppose we want to push on farms, is just to get that soil pH right and work on maybe buying as much P and K as you can on the farm, ensuring that you're building the levels up. It really reduces your requirement for nitrogen once you get the other basic elements of the soil fertility correct on the farm, and improves the quality of the grass. Now look, this spring was challenging. This spring was a disaster. Call a spade for getting out and grazing. It was very late turnout, the complete opposite to last year. So it could have a bit of a negative effect maybe with regards to the timing of finishing of cattle in the back end of this year, because of the I suppose the prolonged winter we had. But it shows again the importance of good quality silage and ensuring that we're hitting as close to that 73 to 75 DMD silage we can possibly get, for the type of stock that's on the farm. There's no passengers here like there is in a sucker herd where you can utilize your poor qualities of forage. So top quality silage is one of the most essential ingredients of grassland management on these dairy beef farms.
And that's something you're really seeing in Teagasc Grange as well, Jamie, from a silage quality point of view, the fact all animals have to perform on the farm.
Yeah, Alan's 100% right. We don't have that, back burner of the suckler cow there to consume any poor quality silage made on the farm. So we need to ensure we're making, 75, 76 DMD silage at all times. We saw the benefits of that last winter on the dairy beef unit. Look, as Alan said, we had an extended winter and a late turnout, but we still managed to have an average daily gain of 0.7 kilos throughout that first winter period on our weanlings and yearling cattle. And that was because, of that high quality, both red clover and perennial ryegrass silage that we made on the farm last year. Cut it at the right time point before we see a lot of heading out occurring. And look, we were quite happy with the performance of the animals. We still were able to avail a compensatory growth at turnout because of that prolonged winter maybe as well. It's a contributing factor to that also. And I guess I very much agree with Alan though on that point on good quality silage.
And you've placed huge focus in Grange in relation to the role of clover in a dairy beef system, Jamie. Can you just talk through what you're seeing with regard to the impact clover is having?
Yeah, I guess we've looked at it both in Grange and as well as Teagasc, Johnstown Castle. Ellen Fitzpatrick below there with Pádraig Coleman has done a lot of work on grazing clover swards, and they've shown a benefit in average daily gain for both perennial ryegrass white clover swards as well as multi-species swards in comparison to ryegrass only. They also had the added benefit in them studies of reducing their nitrogen input on the farm system from 150 kilos per hectare down to 75 kilos for those clover multi-species based system. I guess here closer to home in Grange, we've primarily focused more on the role of red clover silage within our systems. We have shown feeding second cut red clover silage, so a very high proportion of red clover in the silage, 88% clover compared to perennial ryegrass only silage. We showed second cut perennial ryegrass silage that we saw a benefit of 20% in terms of increased average daily gain. However, we do have to look at it as an overall, and we did have a 28% increase in dry matter intake on the weanlings fed the red clover silage. So look, yes, you get benefits from red clover silage in terms of growth, but you're going to use more silage over that winter period. So it's something you do have to be cautious of at farm level. But we did also have the added benefit of not spreading any chemical nitrogen on that red clover silage. It was grown with slurry alone throughout the entire season for all three cuts. So look, there's a big cost saving there for the farmer, but you do just have to be cautious of that increased need for more silage.
That's great, Jimmy, and I suppose, Alan, that's something you're also seeing on the DairyBeef farms. You mentioned there the finishing management and actually getting weight gain on as cheaply as possible. From the farmers that's working with you in the DB500 Programme, what do you see as the key factors in a successful finishing management system?
Yeah, I suppose the first thing is a lot of the time we are a bit guilty, I suppose, of increasing the numbers without increasing the shed space. So just being conscious that, the more you pack those sheds up, probably the poorer the level of thrive you're going to get in these in cattle. So you need to be conscious of what your space allowances are, especially on slatted systems. Cattle, if you look at them inside the shed, they need space to stretch out the legs and lie back. And if you've, 15 cattle inside in the pen that should have only 11, there's not room for that. So that does affect performance. The next thing I suppose is again, look, we touched on already, is going to go into it again, is the silage quality and the importance of that, and how, to show how that can, I suppose, reduce the level of concentrate required in the expensive final 100 days inside. And then the level of concentrate feeding is very important. I suppose what farmers tend to favour, and it is the most efficient way of doing it, is to front load the feeding. You're talking about a high level of concentrates over a short period rather than a low level over a longer period. It is the most efficient. Try and get the vast majority of the finish on those animals, especially the steers, say in the first 80 days. That's the way they focus. So you're talking about good quality silage with between 5 and 7 kilos of a high energy ration for 80, 90 days or thereabouts. That should do a lot of the feeding for you in terms of putting the fat cover on. And other little things then, like water quality, the importance of water. I go into more sheds and I see these little nose drinkers inside. Those little small bold nose drinkers contain a very low level of water. Not exactly ideal for animals that maybe have quite a high intake of a very high dry matter feed, such as 6-7 kilos of concentrates and maybe slightly dry silage as well at times. So the importance of having clean and ample supply of water where they can fill themselves up in one stand, extremely important also. And I suppose, look, it's then just looking at the simple things such as the parasite control, having them dosed correctly for fluke and worms going into the shed, and managing the lice, tipping the backs, etc. Simple things like that. But the basics haven't changed in the last number of years. But we do see sometimes that one thing we've noticed is as numbers have increased on farms, the shed space has not increased in accordance with it.
I suppose, Jamie, from what Alan has mentioned there, a lot of the key factors for, successful finishing, for successful calf rearing, a lot of that has come from the research findings from Grange, or as you mentioned in Johnstown Castle, that farmers are being encouraged to adopt those technologies through the DairyBeef Programme farms. I suppose the detail Alan outlined and the research findings that you've discussed, they're all going to be discussed in detail at the DairyBeef Village at Beef 2026. What can listeners expect to see on the day?
Yeah, so Catherine, the way we're doing the DairyBeef Village this year is we're organising it into different clusters, almost technology clusters, and we're going to have demos ongoing at each cluster. So we have a farm systems demonstration led by Nikki Byrne and the DB500 team, and they'll be looking at selecting the right animals for your system, and there'll be different types of animals on display. We'll also be having a dedicated commercial beef value demonstration, showing farmers where to find the CBE information of animals they could be purchasing, as well as how to interpret that data. And that's being led by Cleaner Ryan and the ICBF. We have a calf rearing demonstration set up as well. That will be led by our team here in Grange of technicians, led by Marie McFadden, as well as Ellen Fitzpatrick. We will look at transition to grass, ensuring the calves don't develop summer scour syndrome and different strategies to try and combat that. There'll be an animal health and welfare demonstration, a lot on parasite resistance, etc. Proper calibration of dosing equipment. There'll be different livers on display showing the damage that can be caused by liver fluke, and that's being led by Orla Keane. And we'll also be looking at monitoring performance at grass, as well as the profitability of our DairyBeef500 Programme farmers, as well as the Tipperary calf to beef demonstration farm, and that's being led by the DairyBeef500 team also, as well as Chloe Miller and Padraig French. So, there's going to be a lot on display across those 7 stops. But I think if dairy beef farmers come to the village on that day, there's going to be something at each stop for them, and they can zero in on a specific demo where they might be having issue at farm level, and to get the information that they want.
A huge amount of information there, Jamie, particularly for any farmer that's currently operating a dairy beef system or even considering operating a dairy beef system. And as Jamie mentioned there, Alan, there's a lot of involvement from the DairyBeef team and also the DairyBeef500 farmers on the day.
Yeah, and look, there'll be a share of us all there in the day to answer any questions, and I'd encourage anyone, look, while we'll be giving talks throughout the day, we're there to answer individual questions, and that afterwards, if you see any of us come up and have a chat with us, there's no problem at all. Even if something individual to your own farm you want to discuss, we'll give our best stab at giving you a hand at sorting.
That's great. Thanks very much, Jamie, and thanks very much, Alan. We look forward to visiting the DairyBeef Village at Beef 2026 on the 1st of July. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
You can catch up on all other shows and interviews from the Beef Edge podcast on the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie, or you can listen on Apple as well as Spotify. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe so you never miss a show. For all other updates from our beef programme, keep an eye on our Twitter and Facebook pages. Until next time, I'm Catherine Egan, and thanks for listening.